of Research and Delicious Mint.
Ground team, when you get to the bus, the officer's driving, the transporter's in the back playing inmate. If the parameters team do their job, you'll go in and place them in a scheduled bus. No one will know the difference. This operation's emergency to attract police attention, so keep your heads down. Got it? Okay, get to work. You're coming up on a bowling road. Hold it together and they'll let you in if you've got clearance.
I thought they were sending professionals. I collaborate.
Intimacy you enjoy
for the pleasure. Just give me... Guys.
You promised to love him.
Rules I hope we run.
We've got eyes on the 399
Let's go!
Great job, team. You've uncovered a deal we're ordering from Asset acquired. Get to the pickup. Paycheck is in your hands, transporter. Rashkovsky. Officer, you're clearing a path for the transporter and Rashkovsky. Get them out alive. Get to work. You're gonna clear the area and then Rashkovsky.
streaming live sports.
Hulu Plus Live TV has over 95 channels.
Let's hurry it up.
I try to change. I don't want to see it no more. I don't want the fans looking up my door. I don't want police keep watching my home. These damn fiends keep calling my phone. I try to change, but the dope game keep calling my name. I try to change, but the dope game keep calling my name. Yeah, I try to change myself for the better. My friend in prison just wrote me a letter telling me stop flipping, everybody snitching. Sometimes I wish that God would take me out this fucking kitchen. I'm feeling paranoid, I don't feel like I am living. Sometimes I'm blinded by the profit that I'm making. Police watching, I know that they hating. I'm on the 21, yeah, I stay with my gun. I promised my mama that I would never be a bum. I pray to God I never get an answer. I always ask myself why a child gets cancer. I know that it's something that we will never know. Can you hear me? I wanna stop selling cloud change. I don't wanna see it no more, no more. I don't want the feds knocking on my door. All the police keep watching my home. Fiends keep calling my phone. I try to change, but the dope game keep calling my name. I try to change, but the dope game keep calling my name. I got a story to tell, see everything I say is real. I done turned down a $3 million deal cause I'm my own boss. I got here by myself. Every time I asked for help, I was talking to myself. So I started selling drugs and increasing my wealth. Cause every time I asked for help, I was just wasting my breath. Only thing I wanna do is a motherfucking legend. And the fact that I'm on tour is a motherfucking blessing. All my old friends started getting mad at me. If this money makes you mad at me, you ain't a friend to me. I lost a lot of friends, to be honest, man, it's cool with me. Snitching, you a piece of shit. Add that to my biography. I try to change, I don't wanna see it no more. I don't want the feds knocking on my door. All the police keep watching my home. These damn fiends keep calling my phone. I try to change, but the dope game keep calling my name. I try to change, but the dope game keep calling my name.
I can't believe the Thin Line's free since we're using.
Having health insurance is important. So if anyone in your family has Texas Medicaid or CHIP, listen up.
Between 2005 and 2006, the city of Phoenix, Arizona became the hunting ground for a prolific and violent serial killer who was targeting the community.
What made the Baseline Killers murders so terrifying was the fact that they appeared to be at random. Every single person was different, and it was no idea when he was going to strike next.
Police were baffled as women were snatched from the street and the bodies started piling up. The pressure was mounting on detectives to find the elusive killer.
So you've got a ton of information and a ton of deaths and a ton of multiple robbers and shootings and rapes. It overwhelmed the police department.
A year after it had been collected, a DNA swab from one of the victims would finally give the terrorized city some answers.
They ran the DNA test, they ran the ballistics, and that was the match. And that's how they connected all of the murders.
A seemingly mild-mannered construction worker, Mark Goodo, had unveiled himself as Phoenix's notorious Baseline Killer. His hunger for kidnapping, rape and murder on his neighborhood has made him one of the world's most evil killers. 2011, 47-year-old Mark Goodo was sentenced to death after he'd been found guilty of 9 murders. The prolific killer had traumatized the city of Phoenix for 12 months, at the same time as the serial shooters, a pair who collectively were responsible for 6 killings. Patrol officer Clark Schwarzkopf remembers the summer of fear.
In the annals of serial criminal behavior, and I've done the research, I don't know if there's ever been a case where you had 2 horrific serial murders operating in not only the same city, but almost the exact same zip code for numerous amounts of their crimes.
The lone gunman responsible for multiple murders in the Baseline Road area of the city was dubbed the Baseline Killer. DNA would eventually lead to the unmasking of local man Mark Goodo, who'd been leading a double life. At his trial, he was keen to paint himself as the devoted husband and respected neighbor.
It was robbing, raping, murdering, whatever crime he could commit at the time, and to put on a friendly face when he wasn't doing these crimes, to talk at his trial to the jury and say, that's not me, I'm not a monster, and knowing everything that all of these victims went through.
This killer story begins in 1964. Mark Goodo was born in
large family, and when there are a lot of children in the family, resources are stretched even further, not just in terms of finances and food and those kind of things, but also in terms of attention and care. And children from large families children, so when she dies, she leaves quite a vacuum in terms of her role within the family.
There was a lot of alcohol abuse in the family. It wasn't what you might describe as a calm, affectionate childhood. And I think as he got into adolescence, he found it more and more difficult. Relatively hard-working, but capable of pretending to be ordinary. One of the things that marks him out throughout his life was the fact that he appeared to be normal.
The apparently ordinary resident had a sinister side to him.
You're through to your garage,
A domestic disturbance in Phoenix.
I'd been on a shift probably most of the night. It was completely dark. And when I pulled into this apartment complex, you know, as a patrol officer, one of the safety things that you do is you always turn your lights off.
I'll get there as soon as I
Just as
can.
I was turning my lights
All
off
right,
and
I'll get back to work.
I noticed what appeared answered, not disheveled, very calm. I asked him to step out, and I immediately handcuffed him. Noticed that there was blood on his hands, and obviously that was a incident of some type of a violent act. took him back inside, sat him down, and then noticed that the apartment was very like there had been a struggle. There wasn't a lot of blood evidence, but enough to know that it looked like there had been some violence.
The account Goodo gave in the back of the patrol car was somewhat different to the scene they were presented with.
It was like, I'm not really sure what happened, kind of thing. I'm not really sure why she ran off, kind of thing. It was obvious that he was very calculated in what he was going to say and not say.
On the 29th of November 1989, Goodo was charged with sexual assault, kidnapping, 5 counts of aggravated assault and attempted murder. But shockingly, he was released on bail. The charges didn't put off his girlfriend Wendy, who remained loyal to Goodo throughout and maintained he was a good man.
All the neighbours that knew he and Wendy said how likeable he was. He was the chap next door, this agreeable, slightly shy, not particularly bright, but nevertheless perfectly ordinary chap. But beneath that lurked something much darker.
There was something awfully sinister about him in my contact with him. And I mean that in a way that you don't commit these types of crimes and keep that type of a posture, that type of attitude, or that type of demeanor without being very callous. And that's how he came across to me, as very callous.
Undeterred by the charges against him, Goodo continued committing crimes as he awaited trial. After a series of robberies and assaults between November 1989 and July 1990, Goodo went on to brutally attack and
assaulted a woman using a shotgun. He beat her with it, as well as raping her. This was a man who found fulfillment, if that's the right word, in violent sex.
The young woman managed to escape despite Goodo's attempts to drown her in the bath.
The fact that Goodo is an interesting one, because if you think about the bathroom in relation to the rest of the house, it's the smallest room in the property very often. It's a room in which you don't have a lot of space to move around. So it's a good location to put someone when you want to control them.
Despite significant head injuries, the woman survived the attack. Goodo's reign of terror culminated in an armed robbery on the 8th of October 1990, before he was finally imprisoned.
There was a robbery charge, kidnapping charge, and an aggravated assault charge. He was convicted of the charges involved in my case and another case, and sentenced to 21 years in the Department of Corrections.
Goodo married his girlfriend while he was in prison, and she would prove a useful ally in convincing a parole board that he was rehabilitated. In 2004, after serving 13 years, he was released.
It was an extraordinary, because this likeable enough model prisoner returned to his family home and to his wife.
I don't think that this is a turning point for him. If anything, the fact that he's been released sends a message out to him. It sends this message out that actually we don't consider that you're that dangerous. We don't consider that your crimes were that bad.
By 2005, 40-year-old Goodo was leading an apparently normal existence. Even the neighbours were understanding of his criminal past.
He was an ex-con who had apparently turned himself around, and yes, he was a construction worker. You know, the neighbors would see him out, cutting the grass, taking care of the lawn, and just saw him as a very stable, nice neighbor.
It's probably the most terrifying of all killers. Someone who doesn't appear slightly mad or a loner or doesn't have a tail or horns or wear a black cloak. He's the chap next door.
Phoenix saw its crime rate soar over the summer of 2005. Law enforcement agencies worked double time to keep up.
So the Phoenix Police Department was in the trawls of this massive, violent crime spring. I mean, shootouts on the streets where dozens and dozens of rounds were fired. Gangs prevalent. It was ungodly hot. There had been wildfires that were raging out of control. It was like this perfect storm, and a police force that was just overwhelmed with all these violent crimes.
One of the hundreds of crimes reported in September 2005 involved two young sisters who were attacked as they walked home from a park.
They were in their early 20s. One of them might have been in her late teens. The old them to strip and sexually assaulted both of them. At one point, and she couldn't get the gun to work. And then he tussled with her. The other sister got a hold of it. She couldn't get it to work either. He got the gun back. He took that gun, he put it between the pregnant woman's legs and made her beg for the life of her baby.
But he's sufficiently wise, after all, he has spent a long time in prison, to know that particularly DNA, and so he tries to cover that up.
The attacker forced both girls to spit in their hands, mixed mud into it before rubbing it all over their breasts in an attempt to destroy the DNA.
And he abandons the girls. Disappears back into his sheep's clothing, if you like. The wolf has gone.
As more reports of sexual assaults and robberies around the Baseline Road area flooded in, police began to link the crimes to a single perpetrator, whom they dubbed the Baseline Rapist. On September the 8th, the serial rapist would strike again, but this time he was out to kill.
Then the murders started showing up. The first was an exotic dancer in Tempe named Georgia Thompson.
Georgia Thompson was 19 years old. She moved from Idaho to Arizona. At one point, she decided to be a dancer at a local strip club here. The night of her death, she went with a friend to Acme Roadhouse in Tempe, which is just a fun bar. I had been there myself during college.
After work, Georgia Thompson set off on the 10-mile drive to her apartment in Tempe, but she never...
The only thing we really know is that a neighbor heard someone screaming, and then there was a gunshot that sounded like fireworks or a backfire of a car. Police were called to the scene, and they found Georgia Thompson laying there on the ground in the parking lot. Her keys still in her hand, and shopping bags strewn about. Her pants were unzipped, and she was shot point blank at the head.
That was the first of the murders. They didn't connect it to anyone. I mean, this is the 5th largest city in the U.S.
The city didn't know it yet, but the Baseline Rapist had become the Baseline Killer, and he was about to hunt his next victim.
Tina Washington was a preschool teacher. She was waiting for a bus, and all of a sudden she was just snatched right off the street like at rush hour down at Southern and 40th Street, and was dragged behind a building where he was assaulting her.
It's December, but he's nevertheless in plain sight, and he's not doing this in a remote area.
was looking into the barrel of a gun, so he slammed the door shut and then called the police. They came, he was gone, and she was dead. This is how fast this was.
He knew the alleys. He knew how to get away quickly and get back to find cover.
Police recovered 2 .38 caliber shell casings from the scene, but no DNA. Detectives suspected the baseline rapist had now escalated his crime spree.
The baseline rapist became the baseline killer when Phoenix police started putting these puzzle pieces together. We realized that we didn't just have a rapist on our hands, we had a murderer.
The baseline killer was quick to strike again when, in February 2006, the bodies of 2 food vendors were discovered in the back of their truck on Lower Buckeye Road.
Including 4-month-old twins. Cheerful women who enjoyed their job.
When the women failed to open up, customers began to worry. A worker from the nearby dairy was the first to investigate the eerie scene.
They were all waiting, the lights were on, but the women weren't there. So after a while they got a little wondering what was going on because it seemed strange, and the man went into the wagon and he found both women. They were bleeding to death. He called 911. He came out when the police came, and he's covered with blood, and he was trying to do CPR.
It's just horrible to think of what Romelia and Myrna went through, and just the shock that they must have been in the moments before they died, and they didn't deserve any of that. And I know that that really hit a lot of people hard.
The attack on the 2 women in the food truck is quite an interesting one for me, because it's what these women represent. There's something that really grates on him about seeing women out there looking after themselves.
The killer left no trace. The police and the citizens of Phoenix had no idea who this depraved individual might be.
He could have been in the queue for lunch, trapped himself, and yet still knew that he killed the 2 women who ran it.
As with the previous victims, the 2 women actually assaulted, a symbol that was becoming something of a trademark for the baseline killer.
One of the things that police noted was that a lot of the women had their pants unzipped and slightly pulled down, but they had not been sexually assaulted.
He didn't manage to commit the act that he thought he was going to. There's something very strange and complex there.
The lack of DNA left by the killer made it an extremely challenging case for the Phoenix police. The community was in utter shock at the heinous and seemingly random attacks.
What made the baseline killer's murder so terrifying was the fact that they appeared to be random. Every single person was different, and it was in different locations. It appeared at the beginning that it was only along the baseline road, but then when police connected some more dots, it was happening in Central Phoenix as well. And we kind of did an inventory of all the victims and realized that it didn't matter race, creed, with the robberies especially, it didn't matter man, woman, age didn't matter. And this was just happening all the time, and we had no idea when he was going to strike next.
On the 14th of March, 23-year-old George Chu offered a lift to co-worker, 20-year-old Liliana Sanchez Cabrera, after her first shift at a restaurant located on 24th Street. When they didn't return home from work, their families became worried.
George Chu was not a target. He was just in the way. The target there was the woman Liliana. George just was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But it's not enough to simply attack him or to simply remove him from the equation. He has to kill him.
He shot George in the back of the head, pushed him out of the car, took over the car, turned around, drove back. She was found the next morning in the car, in her head and her pants undone.
As police attempted to link various crimes across the city, it became clear there were multiple serial killers on the loose, which would further hinder their investigations.
We were dealing with two separate serial murder individuals, but what wasn't real clear was how many perpetrators. We were trying to keep some of that information under wraps. It was an unbelievably confusing time.
It wasn't just the police who were confused. The citizens of Phoenix were terrified as the bodies started piling up. With no apparent leads, a dark cloud hung over the streets.
It was almost impossible to be able to try to capture. We had police-involved shootings on a weekly basis. It was just over rampant with violent crime, and there was only so many investigators, only so many police officers to try to curb all this, and it just exploded.
People were afraid. Women were afraid to go out at night.
I remember leaving work, walking quickly to my car from the office, getting in my car, driving home, and then looking around before getting out of my car and walking the short distance into my home as fast as I possibly could. Because you didn't know if somebody was around. I mean, somebody was going to pull out a gun out of their car.
6 victims had lost their lives at the hands of the baseline. Phoenix police created 2 task forces assigned to find the serial killers terrorizing the streets of the city. Hundreds of officers were assigned to each of the cases as pressure was mounting to bring them to justice.
There was an unbelievable conglomerate of undercover police officers and surveillance. And trying to join these investigations was almost impossible because we had hundreds of people, undercover officers, surveillance officers, clothes officers, all at the same time period, trying not to burn each other, trying not to be noticed, but all operating in the same 5, 6, 7 block area.
Despite the enhanced police presence, the cunning killer was able to strike again. And on April the 4th, the body of 26-year-old Preston Gibbons was found in an alleyway. Like the other victims, she'd been shot with a .38 caliber and ducked close to the baseline road. The serial killer had claimed another life.
What investigators assumed when it came to the baseline killer is that whoever this perpetrator was had what they call a door in the area. In other words, he lived in the area. Because his crimes were committed on foot.
You think of serial criminals as people not really belonging in society or having a place in society. And when I was talking to this police officer, I said, this guy could be somebody's neighbor. And he said, he is somebody's neighbor. And that just really hit me because it's true.
The neighborhood was horrified when the body of Sophia Nunez was discovered at home by her 8-year-old son.
Her son was waiting to be picked up from school, and she couldn't pick him up, so he walked home. He came in through the glass, and he heard the water running in the bathroom, and he saw his mother was taking a shower. So he waited for a while, and then he noticed there was water coming out from underneath the door. And he went in, and he found his mother in the bathtub, half naked. She had a bullet under her eye, and the eye was open. He pulled her out and tried to perform CPR and called the police, but she was dead.
Just like the other victims, 37-year-old Sophia had been shot in the head. But unlike the others, police were able to retrieve DNA from the scene. Investigators would later discover that Sophia had been known to her assailant.
This tells me that he's becoming older in his offending. And we do see this sometimes with serial killers. They simply get bored and they want to push the boundaries a little bit more, especially those who have a hedonistic style.
29th, 2006, Phoenix police went public with a list of 18 crimes they believed to be the work of the Baseline Killer. A composite sketch was created, taken from the descriptions given by the surviving victims. It was widely circulated with the offer of $100,000 for any information.
He was wearing a fisherman's style hat, and it looked to be dreadlocks, and he had like a small mustache, and that was the image that was plastered all over Phoenix, on bus stops, on billboard. That was the image that we had of this guy. But that could be anybody. It's hard to really see from a sketch and try to find somebody who looks like that. And you're really looking for a needle in a haystack.
Police were inundated with thousands of tips, but nothing of any substance.
There's a lot of confused public, a lot of fear, a lot of panic, and not a lot of good information.
I remember this as a reporter. I dropped a friend off at her apartment, and she lived near Baseline Road. And I saw a guy walking in the parking lot with a fisherman's hat.
Take out his supplies.
I was just terrified. I was thinking, maybe that's him. I called the police non-emergency line and said, hey, there's a guy walking around. And I think about how many people probably did that, because we all wanted this to end.
A vital break in the case came when a ballistics expert linked all the casings from the murders to a single .38 caliber weapon. The end was in sight, but it didn't prevent the killer from targeting one final victim on June the 29th, 2006. Shocking CCTV footage emerged that captured the abduction of a 37-year-old mother of two.
The murder of Carmen Miranda was another homicide that really hit me hard, because here's Carmen Miranda at the car wash, washing her car, talking on her cell phone to her significant other, and she says, oh, hold on a second, and here's this guy who she thinks is just a homeless man or posing as somebody, and then you hear a scream.
Miranda's dead. He calls the cops. He calls his girlfriend's brothers, and they all go running to the spot, and they're there almost instantly.
It happened so fast. You think of these things happening in real life, and you think about what you would do if this had happened, but she didn't have a chance. They tried to get there as quickly as they could, and it was just too late.
They had looked for her for hours, and then hours later, they found her less than 100 yards away, behind a barber shop, with a bullet in her head and her pants unzipped in the car. At that point, when we saw that video, then the panic really hit.
Abducting someone in plain sight is a very high-risk thing for an offender to do. There's a high likelihood that they're going to get caught, they're going to get apprehended, somebody else is going to intervene. So it's an incredibly bold move.
He's escalating it. Pleasure. He's doing it without any sense. He's going to get away with it. After all, he's got away with it up till now.
Baseline Killer. Women living in the city were paralyzed with fear.
You think about how this could be you. I mean, it really could be. You could be washing your car. You could be taking a walk with your sister in the park. This just happened to no decision on a specific type of person. It was just whoever he had the chance to do it to.
But his chances had run out. And in July, another breakthrough came when a woman who recognized the man in the sketch came forward. It was a familiar name to Patrol Officer Clark Schwarzkopf when the report landed on his desk.
I started going through it. I go, oh my God. see the investigator down here, and then it comes to this webpage. And there in bold letters is Mark Goodell.
And now you're here to kill us.
Police finally had a suspect for the evasive baseline killer. 41-year-old Mark Goodell was put under surveillance as investigators desperately searched for proof. But the breakthrough would come from an unexpected direction. Poor quality DNA evidence recovered from the two sisters he attacked 10 months earlier was re-examined.
He tried to foil my investigation. First, he forced both sisters to spit in his hand. And he put like dirt and made mud in his hand, and he rubbed that over their breasts to try to cover it up. And of course, when they tried to pull DNA from that, they got gunpowder. There was nothing that they could do with standard DNA testing.
The DNA sample, previously analyzed at the city's forensic lab in 2005, was sent for testing at the more advanced Arizona State Laboratory.
What they did was they used a newer form of DNA testing that focuses on the Y chromosome, or the male chromosome.
And of course, because Goodell has been in prison, and because there's a record of his DNA, it's instantly a match.
Investigators were now convinced that Mark Goodell was the baseline killer, but they only had evidence linking him to the September 2005 attack on the two young sisters. Believing it was enough to convict the suspected killer, on September the 6th, 2006, Goodell was arrested and his house was searched.
At 11 o'clock, my phone rang, and it was my editor saying they think they caught the baseline killer. We were going up and down the street at midnight with all the TV trucks and everything, and that's when we came up with the name Mark Goodell. And over the next 48 hours, we worked around the clock trying to figure out, put together who this person was.
It's hard to put a finger on what every single person in the public thinks of Mark Goodell being arrested, but what I seem to remember at the time, speaking from a reporter's perspective and seeing this, everybody just was happy that someone was caught, and I think the majority of people thought, yeah, this is the right guy.
Investigators seized various items from Goodell's house in the hours after his arrest.
They find blood on the soles of pairs of sneakers that belong to Goodell that match the victims.
Forensic testing would later identify the blood as being that of George Chu, murdered on the 14th of March, and Kristen Gibbons, found in an alleyway 2 weeks later.
The main thing was the DNA. You know, DNA doesn't lie.
The second search of the property a month after his arrest in October 2006 revealed another key piece of evidence linking Goodell to the savage murder of preschool worker Tina Washington.
They find Tina Washington's ring with the "We Love Mum" inscribed on it.
This is a ring that is very precious to her. It's very special. It has the names of loved ones engraved upon it. And Goodell will realise that this is something that's of significance, that is of importance to his victim. So he takes it. And this is all part of the extending feelings of control over the victim.
As officers continued investigating Goodell for the 9 murders linked to the baseline killer, the trial relating to the sexual assault of 2 Phoenix sisters was already underway. In September 2007, despite maintaining his innocence, he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 438 years in prison.
I never doubted that the police found the right person, but it's always just this weird dichotomy because you're just expecting this brutal killer with something wrong with him, and then when you actually see him talking in his personality, it's not like that. It's like he's just a person.
They just armed the missile system.
If I did all these things, then I'm not a very good judge of human character.
at the end of the tunnels. If we get in there, we can stop
The final piece of the puzzle in the baseline killer case came when the daughter of Sophia Nunes, the 37-year-old whose young son had found her shot dead in her bathtub, recognized an image of Goodo on the news after his arrest.
The daughter said, "Hey, that's my mother's friend." And so she dropped the dime and told the police. Police went back, looked at Mark Goodo's records, found a number of calls he had made to Sophia, matched the bullet, got the DNA, and that tied all of the murders together. Because it, for once, tied the ballistics to the DNA to Mark Goodo. And they were off with the next batch of indictments.
Goodo was charged with 74 crimes, ranging from kidnapping to sexual assault and murder, and would plead not guilty when the next trial began in April 2011. The case was split into 13 chapters, each one focusing on a scene or a murder. It was a complex case for Judge Warren Granville.
This was a whodunit trial. So the whole focus of all of the evidence that the state was intending to prove that it was Mr. Goodo who did the acts. So the DNA was identification evidence. DNA says it's Mr. Goodo. The same thing as ballistics was identification evidence. Questions are, do you see that man in the courtroom today? Yes, I do. And he pointed to Mr. Goodo and said, that's him.
The young son of Sophia Nunes also about the tragic events of his murder.
Nothing freezes a courtroom more than when you have a person to testify. He was the youngest of the witnesses. And I just remember the drama that you feel when he walks in the courtroom to testify about finding his mom in the tunnel.
What has this guy been up to?
It was an extremely difficult time for friends and family members of all of the victims during the court proceedings.
Lewis says his mother at one point was standing. I wish I could stick my hand into my heart and pull it out, show it to you.
Because our brash and annoying elected leader spikes the nuclear football up to That's the brash and annoying self-proclaimed
I'm just sorry that I couldn't have been a better daddy and kept my foot home. And so just to hear that from this father who was clearly heartbroken, and it was just, yeah, I really felt that.
One witness described finding the two women in the food truck and his futile attempts to resuscitate them.
When he testified in court, Amelia's husband was sitting in the back of the court. Big man named Alvin. Alvin follows the man. I got up and
You've got a single board computer. Plug it in.
Alvin goes up to me and says, I knew someone was there.
Override to launch will be the PDPC's hardware keys, which we don't have. But maybe
Thank you for trying to help me.
plug in your machine.
These two giant men.
Okay.
He said, I wish I could have done more. These two giant men embracing in the court hallway.
Keep it up.
In October 2011, Mark Goodo was found guilty of 67 crimes, including all 9 murder charges. But it wasn't over yet.
The jury's had a decision to make. You have found him guilty, you have found him eligible for the death penalty, what sentence do you think is right?
Goodo was given the opportunity to address the jurors before final sentencing.
I have real feelings. Life-giving feelings. I am also right. Your eyes. The way concept of
insulting to the victims and their families. He's given this platform when he's effectively silenced these poor women.
Look at each and every one of you guys today. It showed you there's no work in cheap clothing. They paint me this monster.
In November 2011, Mark Goodall was sentenced.
They had the choice of either a life sentence or a death penalty. So they made 9 independent judgments for each one of those murders. It should be the death penalty.
The verdict brought little comfort to the friends and families of all the victims.
What stands out about this case is the absolute grief of the survivors, the mothers, the husbands of the victims, and the insights they have and the things that they say that were this unimaginable tragedy.
For the residents of Phoenix, the summers of 2005 and 2006 will forever leave them trying to understand why.
Now the next one. Next console, please.
Do something like this. You have to be that person to understand why they do it. Maybe there's no reason.
Bank on that. Why don't you just stop shooting my men and we can hash this out? Run a conflict res session. All hands, 360 feedback. With the rest of humanity wiped out, we might want to learn to get along.
Psychopathic sexual predator.
No hashing out, no resolution.
Mark Goodall enjoyed the power and dominion he exercised over women. He was driven by a hunger to control them. Brutal attacks caused unimaginable terror and anguish to his victims and unbearable suffering to their families and the community. Mark Goodall will forever be known as one of the world's most evil killers.
Authenticated. Almost. There's one more layer. Final console.
Everyone knows you as a problem solver. You know who to call to help keep your operation running.
Papa John's is rolling back prices for a limited time. Get 2 large 2-topping pizzas for under $15. Now that's a deal. A little dough goes a long way at Papa John's. Papa John's. Better ingredients, better pizza, better get you some.
In May 2005, 9-year-old Crystal Tobias and her 8-year-old friend Laura Hobbs went to play at their local park on their bikes. They didn't return.
They found them by the park and I remember that day my heart fell on the floor.
Missile launch protocol override. Don't celebrate just yet. Avon's got men all over there. There's some fighting.
It was very dark.
What happened?
Suspicion immediately turned to the father of one of the girls who recently been released from prison.
He had found his daughter brutalized, killed, stabbed, and yet he's the only likely suspect.
The grieving father spent 5 years behind bars before DNA uncovered the true killer who'd been hiding in plain sight all along. A family friend, Jorge.
And he would do it.
The double murder was just the beginning. 5 years later, a DNA trail would reveal Jorge Torres as one of the world's most evil killers. 2010, 21-year-old U.S. Marine Jorge Torres was arrested for abduction, use of firearms, and rape. Theo Stamos was a lead prosecutor on the case.
He didn't look menacing. He didn't look like someone who is your stereotypical serial murderer / rapist. That's what made it even more sinister, because he was so unassuming that way.
After a series of targeted attacks on women in Arlington, Virginia, Torres had been tracked down by police.
These were just dedicated police officers on patrol in a suburb of Washington, D.C., who put together their observations, their surveillance, their police work, and helped to arrest a very, very dangerous guy.
After his arrest, the subsequent investigation revealed Torres was responsible for a lot more than anyone had expected.
When we learned that he had been involved as I believe a 16-year-old, murdering these two young, innocent girls, it was mind-blowing.
This killer story began in Zion.
His father was a working-class guy, mother as well. So from what I could tell, he came from a pretty solid family.
I don't think you could call him exactly a gregarious boy, rather sort of remote. I think he struggled somewhat at school and consoled himself by cycling around the area. He was a keen cyclist.
It was whilst out cycling in the local neighborhood that Torres met Alberto Segura, and the pair became friends.
He was a really quiet guy. He didn't speak very much. He was a little older than I was, but he kept to himself. And somewhat like my sister, we were very nice. And if we see somebody by themselves, we will come here. And that's kind of how it all happened.
16-year-old, he noticed Torres, known as George by his friends, spent little time with his family.
He really did not like being at home. He didn't ever give me much details, but he wouldn't really talk really good about his parents. He would always say, "Oh, I can't wait to leave my house. I can't wait to finally, get my own spot."
Very often when we look at individuals like Torres, they feel excluded. But when you speak to members of their family, it's very clear that wasn't the case, but it's that perception of exclusion that matters here.
When the two teens started to take an interest in girls, this feeling of exclusion would be exacerbated as an awkward Torres struggled to connect with the opposite sex.
Examples of when, like, George would be like, "Dude, how do you get girls, man? It seems like girls just want to date girls."
There's quite clear evidence that Torres was very jealous of others. He seemed to be able to meet girls at any instant and befriend them.
So when I was dating this gal named Jenny, there would be a time when he would come with me, and he would always have an expression on his face like, "What am I doing wrong? Like, how did he get her? Or what's wrong with me?" type of look.
So here we have this tension that's developing. He feels an entitlement to be dating, but the women he wants to date don't want to date him. So they become almost like an enemy that he has to defeat.
All the girls would be like, "No, get away from me." And I'm just like, I don't know why they're doing that to you, George, but you're coming off weird. I would notice that, you know what, maybe there's something wrong here with just...
Torres was talking to women that gave Alberto cause for concern.
There's an example where he tied a girl to a trampoline, like being funny, but that ain't funny. They were jumping around, just having a good old time, and then the girls are like versus the boys, and the boys versus the girls, type of situation, and then he took it too far, and then grabbed like a jump rope, and tied her
quiet.
Little by little, that's where I'd be like, you know what, maybe I need to keep a distance. And so I did.
The friend 2005. That fateful day began like any usual Sunday for Alberto.
There'll be dickhead AIs everywhere. Now he's doing the IP for that. Anyway, stop him.
I seen my sister riding her bike to Laura's house. And she was on the sidewalk. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing? She said, I'm going to Laura's house.
9-year-old Laura Hobbs had become best friends with Alberto's little sister Crystal soon after her family moved into the neighborhood.
Their relationship was really close. They would do everything together. And they would have sleepovers. They both liked the same things. They both liked planting. And so they had a connection. They both liked riding their bikes together. Whatever they can do together, they would.
The girls would usually be out on their bikes until dinner time, but on this particular day, they didn't return.
The sun was starting to go down a little bit. It was around maybe 6, 7 o'clock, and usually Laura's home at a much earlier time.
Alberto and Crystal's mom, Marina, was at home preparing a family meal.
It's when I was going to start dinner, Laura's mom came to my house to ask if Laura was there. I said, no.
And so her mom was already kind of freaking out. I didn't think nothing of it. I'm like, well, let's go ask Crystal. Let's see where she's at. Like, you know, let's ask her if she knows where Laura's at. You know, I realized, like, well, she ain't here. Crystal is not here.
But I didn't thought right away nothing bad. We started looking, and that's when we didn't find her, and that's the neighbors, and that's when we got nervous and anxious.
Laura's mom and my mom decide, well, let's call the cops. You know, because they're never out past this time. They're always somewhere where they can be seen. A few friends of mine, we got on our bikes and started going around the whole neighborhood trying to find her.
The entire community of Zion rallied together, and as police arrived to join the search, fear started to mount for the girls' safety.
I remember a police officer, once I pulled up to the front of the house, I'm like, oh, this is serious. It's like my sister is missing at the moment, and it was becoming more scary.
I was really mad because not knowing where she was, and with her, and her board had taken her or something. I was thinking that the worst.
Everyone was looking for her. There was at least 20, 25 people out walking around in different directions, different pockets of people looking around.
Just come to the observatory, okay?
One of the people who takes part in that initial search is Jorge Torres.
I thought this would be a nice, genius piece for me and Tito's heist work.
He wasn't in my group.
Yeah, it ain't for me. I'll save the supervillains for the superheroes.
With no sign after hours of searching, Alberto and Marina returned home to wait for news. Police and family continued to search.
As night falls, the search for Crystal and Laura is called. But Jerry Hobbs and Laura's grandfather, Art, keep on searching through the night.
I was just hoping to find her. I just wanted her to come back. It was shocked me and my husband and my kids. We would never thought that something so bad could happen.
It would be an agonizing night for the families of the young girls, and the following morning their worst fears were confirmed. Desperate for news, Crystal's mother Marina went to the Hobbs house the following morning.
I went to hers, and that's when she said, "You don't know yet." I said, "What?" I said that they found them in the park.
On the 9th of May, at 6 a.m., the two young girls were discovered in the woods of Beulah Park in Zion. Laura had been sexually assaulted, and both girls had been brutally murdered.
found out first. I think it was like her husband and his father found him in the woods. Yeah. After that, well, yeah, I knew that there was no more hope and that there was no way she was coming back.
My mom tells my dad that my sister was found and that she was dead.
Hey, is that all those rusters?
My dad ran upstairs and he was crying. It was the first time I've ever seen him cry. My brothers woke up. They heard everything and they were sobbing. They were crying loud. My youngest brother, David, he that was his best friend. So he was devastated.
I just felt that my heart fell in the floor. I literally